Hello, Heather.
Hello, Heather.
How lovely to be here with you.
Indeed, after all these years.
I know. Now, let's put this into some perspective at the very beginning. I've actually been connected to your family all of my life.
Yes.
Because your brother, Ian, was best man at my parents' wedding.
Yes, and your father was certainly my brother's best friend, and he was always so good to Ian, known always as Parker. Uncle Parker, your Uncle Parker.
That's right. We all had wonderful times together. And I was actually named after you.
Oh, it's extraordinary, isn't it?
I know, and here we are both now sitting and talking to each other in Old Parliament House.
In all these years later. Yes.
I know.
Yes.
Now, your father, Sir Robert Menzies, founded the Liberal Party and was our longest serving Prime Minister.
Yes.
But to you, he would have been a very different person.
Oh, indeed, yes. He was Dad to me, and completely, well, not completely different, but different from the public figure. Although he was certainly warmly regarded by a lot more people than people realise. I always enjoy that little exchange in Parliament when my father was being abused, and someone on the other side said, "You know you're not popular." And Dad said, "Well, you can say that." But the other day in the car, I pulled up at the traffic lights and a truck driver was next to me, and he looked across and recognised me and said, "Good on you, Bob."
They were very different times, weren't they?
Oh, they were. Partly because Old Parliament House was so much smaller and they shared everything. They didn't all have their own little room with their own staff, and so they mingled. They saw each other for lunch or dinner or in the house, and it's very hard to be really nasty to somebody you know. I think it made for a much better atmosphere, and I think probably better for the country.
And they'd mingle from different sides of politics as well, sharply different sides.
Oh yes, always. Mm.
For example, your father was highly regarded by, I think, Chifley and John Curtin, Labor leaders.
Yes, they got on very well. And there was one of them who he and Dad used to exchange whodunits. And he'd come around and say, "I think you might enjoy this one." I've forgotten who it was.
I think it was Chifley.
Was it Chifley?
Yes.
Probably. I'm sure it makes for better government if they can be civil to each other and get on with each other.
Do you think those days are gone for good, though? It's very different now.
It is very different, and part of it's, I think, the fault of Parliament House, which was so enormous, the new one, and they have to yell to be heard, so they all yell at each other, and then they go back to their own room with their own people, so they're all on the same side.
Your father, when you were on overseas postings with your husband, used to write you a lot of letters.
Yes.
Extraordinary letters, which you published in a book. His relationship with the media was quite a different one to what you see today. How would you describe that?
It was interesting because he really was pretty intolerant of the media. It wasn't media, it was just press. It was only newspapers. Oh, I suppose radio too, yes. He felt sometimes they misreported what he said. So it was not a warm relationship, really. And yet, I think they got on all right in the end. It was okay. But he was pretty, I have to say, he was pretty intolerant of the press on the whole.
Well, at this point, let me read one of his quotes in one of the letters to you. "The moment a government sets out to try and please the press, instead of pleasing its own judgment, it makes itself dependent upon its favour. And when that favour is withdrawn, the results are very bad." What do you think of that?
I think he's had a good point there.
And there's another one here too, which you've got on the back of the book. I believe most firmly that if a leader is to lead, he must make his own speeches, do his own thinking, and be politely deaf to the so-called expert.
And that I do agree with, absolutely, because I think these days so often ministers are surrounded by yes men.
So is that how your father very much conducted himself?
Oh yes, certainly. And he would hate the idea of somebody else writing a speech for him. He couldn't do that at all. In fact, if somebody did compose a speech for him, he would rewrite it or at least have it in his words. He would not like this present system where people so often get up and read their speech. They're not looking at the audience, they're not connecting with the audience. And yet, I know from my own experience, if you get up, if you say something to the audience that gets their attention, you can feel it. You can literally feel the audience coming in and listening to what you've got to say. And that's what he was like. He would start off maybe with a light-hearted remark of some sort, but he got people listening. And once they were listening, he could put across the message he wanted them to hear.
Back to the letters. He gives quite a critique, doesn't he, of what he thought of events.
Oh, yes.
And characters.
Yes.
Going on at the time. For example, Billy McMahon, one of our former Prime Ministers, that untrustworthy little scamp McMahon is already, I think, on the warpath. I hope he doesn't succeed. Because while John Gorton, who was the current Prime Minister then, after your father retired, has grave defects of mental equipment and hard work and experience, McMahon is simply not to be trusted. And what about when Harold Holt was in the Lodge, the first Prime Minister after your father departed, the Lodge was redecorated by Zara, his wife Zara Holt. The psychedelic hand of Zara Holt is heavy on the house. The guest rooms were painted in what I'm told is a shocking pink. And the colour certainly shocked me. I'm sorry for any guest who's not feeling well when he first encounters the blow.
I should have cut that bit out, shouldn't I?
What did your father think later after his departure from politics?
He was very depressed about things. He felt it had changed and it perhaps was not the Liberal Party he had created. It's not easy being retired, but it was decided he was not going to interfere. Once he retired, that was it, and he shut up. I know not everybody agrees with that, but that's what he thought. And I think it was right. He said, no, I've had my day. It's somebody else is there now.
He did say in his letter to you, which you've published, I write to you at a time when I think I've never felt worse about politics. The idiots who now run the Liberal Party will drive me right around the bend. Their last move is to deny supply to the present government in the Senate. Now that is something that shocks me.
Yes, I can remember him sitting there saying what he thought to the television. So-and-so can do nothing right.
What was your relationship with your father?
Well, he was my father and we had a lot in common. We had a lot of laughs together. We thought the same in many ways. I'm not for a minute suggesting I'm in his league, but we certainly had great rapport and enjoyed each other's company. And I think I took after him in all sorts of ways, except I was idle and he was conscientious. He was a real worker. He worked all the time. And when I was a child, I didn't really know him because he was a barrister So he was at work during the day, and then at night and weekends he'd be sitting at his desk working. So my poor mother, I think she was mother and father to all of us, including the boys. Although I certainly did know him at school. I can remember there was one night, speech night at school, and he started off, as he thought, making a little joke just to cheer things up. And he said, "Now, I'd just like to say it has come to my notice that somebody has been going around writing, 'Stay free, keep Menzies out.' Now, if the girl who did that would stand up and own up, I'll give her 5 shillings for her honesty." And so, of course, I said, people next to me, the girls next to me, "Oh, it's tempting." And they said, "God, stand up, stand up, stand up." So I did stand up. And I went up to collect my 5 bob, and he was clutching the piano with the tears running down his face. He thought it was so funny. And, of course, it was funny for everybody there. But the next day, it was a little bit in the paper about it. And, it was not funny. I had an anonymous letter saying, "Is that the red, white and blue way for a little girl not to tell the truth?"
Because you were fibbing.
Yes, I was cheating.
To get the 5 shillings, though.
I got my 5 shillings.
And when he became Prime Minister, particularly his longer stint, the second time around, you used to live at the Lodge, didn't you?
Yes, not to begin with, because I was still at university, but then I did live at Lodge. It was my home. And it was my parents' only home, because being hopeless at real estate, they'd sold the house they'd lived in because they didn't like it very much. And so they were out of the market completely after 16 years without a house. The prices had all changed. They certainly made the Lodge their home, and in those days, their own pictures, everything was theirs. It was just like, to me, it felt like a Menzies house.
And your mother was actually the cook a lot of the time, wasn't she?
She was. She did a lot of cooking, particularly to begin with, until they got it all sorted out a bit. But she, at one stage, was doing the cooking, and they had people coming for dinner. And she said at that stage, they very briefly had a man who was the butler. And she said she was cooking the dinner, and she did all the dinner and put it in the hot thing, and then raced upstairs, changed her clothes, and came down and entertained the guests. And she said, "I was almost shaking when the butler pulled out the chair for me to sit down and pushed me in."
My memory of your mother was always how busy she seemed. Always busy.
Yes, oh good. This is on my wedding day, wearing my wedding dress, coming down the stairs at the Lodge. And the person holding up the train at the back is the one who made the dress.
It's a beautiful dress. And how special to start your wedding day at the Lodge?
Well, I suppose it was special, but to me it was home. So it was like starting your wedding day at home. I suppose that's presumptuous now, isn't it? But
well, not many people can say that.
But well, no, maybe not.
How would you sum up your parents?
Sum them up? I don't know. Well, they were certainly a very good team. In fact, a journalist called Mark McGuinness wrote an article once, and he started off saying, "After Bob and Dolly Dyer, Bob and Patty Menzies were the best-known double act in Australia." And I think it's true, they were a double act. My mother did a lot of things on her own. She travelled around Australia, and she talked to mostly women's groups and CWA, people like that. And she was very well known right around Australia. And so she appealed to a different sort of audience. And my father, she didn't talk politics, he talked politics. And it just worked somehow. They were a good team, I think.
You also went on to travel with your parents on election campaigns, didn't you? What was that like?
It was interesting, to say the least, because in those days electioneering was speaking in a hall or sometimes in the street. And without television, the crowds used to come. And that was very interesting, fascinating.
Here, we've got your father meeting Churchill.
Well, they got on well. To begin with, I think Churchill thought Menzies was a bit of an upstart because he went there in 1941 during the war. And according to my father, all the heads of the services and so on, they'd sit round in this cabinet thing and they all said, yes, sir, no, sir, to whatever Churchill said. Whereas Dad got there, this upstart from the colonies, and he questioned him and discussed things and said, well, what do you mean by that? And so to begin with, Churchill wasn't sure about Menzies, I think. But in the end, of course, they became very, very good friends, to the extent that Lady Churchill asked him to do the eulogy when her husband died, and they, really became almost part of the family. And their daughter Mary remained a friend of mine forever till she died. So it was a marvellous combination.
And did you meet Winston Churchill yourself?
I did. The year I went instead of my mother, we went to stay at Chequers for the weekend. And to begin with, we all sat round, about a dozen people, having a drink before dinner. And Churchill finished his whiskey, so I went and got him another one. And for the first time, he looked at me and he said, why are you doing that? And I said, well, it seemed like a good idea. So he then started talking to me and said, come and have a look at my fish. And he had a fish tag. And he said, that little light, bright-coloured one, that's called a neon fish. And it was given to me by somebody in America. So I listened to all this about all the fish. Then we went into dinner, and it was a round table, and I was on his right. And the first thing that happened was the housemaid brought in a plate of chopped meat, dog's meat, and put it on the table next to him. He picked it up, put it on the floor, and said, I always feed Rufus myself. And I thought, oh, big deal, mate. That was hard. Pick it up and put it on the ground.
At the table where you were all sitting?
Yes.
Great spot to feed the dog,
Oh,
too.
yes.
Your father, of course, was known for his politics and being Australia's longest-serving Prime Minister.
Yeah.
But he also loved sport, didn't he?
Yes, he did. He did. He loved cricket, and he used to go to the Australian rules football, always in Melbourne, as a Carlton supporter. But he certainly was a good spectator. And with the cricketing team, he created his own cricket team in Canberra. And I can remember him sitting there with pencil and paper working out who to have in it. And he wanted to have some of the local people as well. And he used to go and watch the locals playing. And so he knew who was good and who was not amongst the local people. So all these young locals who were not well known at all would end up playing cricket with some of the stars. And it was just such a nice atmosphere and such fun.
Is this what we call the PM's 11, which
Yes.
continues to this day?
Yes, it
There's
is.
a match held every
But
year
it's become
with
much
PM's 11.
grander now. It's become bigger and more professional, I think, in a way.
I also have an image in my mind of your father later in life, I think when he was unwell, of being driven in a big car to watch Carlton play in AFL games in Melbourne.
Yes, I used to do some volunteering work in a family planning clinic, and one day a new woman came in to help, and she was an American, and she'd just been in Melbourne for 2 years, and she said, it was fascinating. She said, your Sir Robert Menzies was driven in his car right round the Oval. The whole place stood and cheered. And she said, it must be wonderful to be loved as that man is loved. And the woman running it said, do you know who Heather is? So then she told her that was my father. So, but it was such a nice thing to hear. Such a nice thing.
Well, why don't we now go and take a look at where your father and his secretary used to work?
Yes.
Just next door.
I think it's changed a bit.
It has changed a bit, but let's have a look and see.
Yes. Oh, yes, it has changed a lot, hasn't it? It's certainly been extended. And look at all these desks. There was nothing like as many people
Is this
in those days.
Is this where the Prime Minister's office was, though, his
Yes,
staff?
it is. And this sort of... And he was down in... He had a room down there, and his secretary was one there was one here.
Is this where he would have dictated letters and correspondence?
Well, I think they would have gone into him and to do it. And he used to stand, he has a good view down the front of Parliament House, old Parliament House. And he would do a lot of thinking there, standing and looking out and thinking and working out what he wanted to say or do. And Hazel would go in, or Lenny, as it was, Eileen Lennon,
His secretary.
his secretary, and they would take dictation and type up letters and that sort of thing. It was much smaller, much smaller.
But you would have come into this area.
Oh, I used to go
Quite a
in
lot.
quite a lot.
And where was the Prime Minister's office?
Right here. I'm not sure it was as big as this.
Oh, I think they extended this, didn't they?
Yes, they've added quite a lot.
Yes, but this is roughly where your father's office was.
Yes, it was. It's quite extraordinary.
Well, Heather, it's been a delight to reminisce with you.
Oh, well, it's good to see you too.
And thank you so much for sharing all that history.
Well, it's part of my life.